Beasley will show us, with our current contract language, we don't have the option of trying to retrofit our current value system that honors our uniqueness into the old cookie cutter system that values sameness. And as simple as it would be to do so, do we really want to? In summary, there simply is no salary schedule in the current contract, no matter how much Mr. Beasley and the TEA leaders want there to be. And therefore, no matter what numbers they've crunched using the old salary schedule, the numbers are simply just wrong. It is flawed thinking under our current contract to think that you can just line up each individual's teacher salary and form an opinion on who should be where on that list. Our current contract, the one that exists right now, that we must abide by, has absolutely no room for these types of comparisons. Instead, and I would argue that it is to all of our benefit, that there are so many other unique characteristics that must be considered. What is right is for us to celebrate when our members' uniqueness is honored and insist in each subsequent contract that we negotiate in the future that it be honored even more so. If I were part of the TEA leadership team, I would fight for uniqueness over cookie cutters every day of the week, because that is truly where our strengths lie. I would resign my position as a union leader before I let some outdated system define my members or strip them of their uniqueness. I would contend that the new definition of fairness and equity is that everyone be compensated based on his or her uniqueness, and when someone is being told to get in line, I would fight for their uniqueness. We can be united as a union, but that doesn't mean we have to go back to being cookie cutters. Our current contract language dictates, no, it insists upon uniqueness rather than cookie cutters in no uncertain terms. My hope and prayer is that our school board and our union leadership will also show that they value teachers' uniqueness as well by upholding these values and our current contract rather than using outdated contract language to try and put us in line. Thank you for listening.
Good evening. Nice to see everybody. I'm Angel Bensing. I'm a former administrator here, both at the high school and at Compass last year, current art teacher at West, and an employee of Tecumseh Public Schools for well over a decade. Clearly we're here tonight based on a grievance that will be heard regarding my compensation. 1 year ago I was the principal at Compass, and it was a challenging position, but one that I really enjoyed being a part of. We tried to pull 4 elementaries together, in a position that I was entrusted with and excited to take on, to take all 4 together with 1 middle school as well and bring us together as one united group. I was charged with this task of helping to bring all of these cultures together and help create a new one. The task included things like establishing procedures, managing staff, creating partnerships with family and community, all in a newly established building and situation. The knowledge and experience gained in this experience was absolutely immeasurable. There is absolutely no way that you could quantify that. I returned to teaching after several years as an administrator with an increased knowledge base and experience. This experience is a part of that uniqueness that Robin talked about. The experience and education that I gained not only from that position, but also through my schooling is one, again, that is unique to my situation. That's one of the great things about working at Tecumseh, and one of the great things that is valued here. This compensation was discussed through appropriate means, excuse me, and seems reasonable and fair considering the current contract language, much like Robin spoke about already. I was made aware that this grievance was being filed on behalf of the teachers, some of which who seemed to be unaware that the grievance existed altogether. At no point did the president or vice president of the union come to talk to me about the process that I went through, not only determining my salary, but the process that would ensue after filing the grievance. At no point did the union leadership discuss with me the issue at hand or the concern for the grievance. And at no point did any member of union leadership talk to me about the grievance being filed, nor have they had any communication with me up until this point. The lack of communication regarding this process left me to wonder and worry about my livelihood, financial well-being, and the well-being of my family for over 3 months. I have also been told that this is not personal. It is very hard to not take it personally when it affects yourself and your family. As you can imagine, I've not been made to feel real comfortable to ask for additional assistance or clarification in this point. And as I say, it's been at least a 3-month waiting game where I've wondered and worried about my livelihood and the financial security of my family. I do understand that the Board of Education needs to follow due process. I just wanted to ensure that my voice was heard. Every day that I have spent at Tecumseh Public Schools, it has been my pleasure and my goal every day to do what is best for our kids in any capacity that I'm asked to do that. Role does not matter, not at all. And I will continue to do that without complaint. And I just ask that you all consider the impact that this is having and consider the current contract language. As I said, it's my joy to come to work every single day here. I choose Tecumseh. And my goal every single day is to get up and do what's right for the kids in this community and help to move us forward. And as I say, I will continue to do that. And I'm hopeful that eventually that this can be done with a positive, supportive teachers union that will work collaboratively with the board and the community for the betterment of our children and moving this community forward. This truly is the greatest place to work and the greatest place to be. And it has been an absolute joy. I thank you for listening to me this evening.
Good evening. My name is Alan Schmidt. I've been an educator for 16 years. I began my career teaching science at the high school and middle school levels. I then spent 5 years as an administrator both at the high school and the middle school levels before deciding to return to the classroom this fall. October 3rd. This is the date that I was informed by a member of the union executive board that although it wasn't personal, a grievance would be filed regarding the amount of my annual salary. Upon hearing this 5 minutes before I was to teach class, I was filled with a wide variety of emotions. My initial question was, what does that even mean? The response was, it had been determined by the union leadership that I had been inappropriately placed on the salary scale. I found this difficult to comprehend as I knew the contract and there is no salary schedule in the current contract. My next question was then obviously, well, what exactly do you feel you suppose I should be making, and how did you determine this number? I was told we didn't exactly know. But they were sure it wasn't that far off. I'm still not exactly sure what that even means. I was then asked to meet Mr. Mills' office to continue the discussion. I appreciated the opportunity to vent my frustrations, but the questions of what this meant and what repercussions this grievance could bring for me and my family only continued to grow. The last question I was asked before returning to my classroom was, what do you need from me? I said I needed to know what they felt the salary number could be and to be kept in the know as much as possible. October 3rd. This was the last time I had any conversation with a member of the executive board on this topic. Since then, I've spent the last 3 months anxiously waiting. I still haven't the slightest idea what this grievance could ultimately result in. I've been left to wonder what the result of this process could mean. Are we talking about things such as having to leave my teaching and coaching positions, leave the district, or the profession in general? Could it mean that I may struggle to make my next mortgage payment? Will I have to move and leave the area? What will I need to do to make sure I don't let my wife and 3 little girls down? I've been asking myself these questions since October 3rd. Don't get me wrong. I understand the process takes time. I understand that there are procedures and documents that need to be processed and dealt with. But to not be provided any information whatsoever has been hurtful. I was not even given the common courtesy of knowing when the grievances were being moved to the next level, let alone how the contract language led to a union filing a grievance to take money away from members of a collective bargaining group in the first place. I thank the board for taking the time to listen to me tonight. I trust you will make a decision based on the current contract language. I know many of you personally. I know you all have a desire to continue moving Tecumseh Public Schools forward. I look forward to joining you on that journey.
My name is Joe Bundes, and I'm just here to say that I'm a current Tecumseh Public Schools employee. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. And we will, any revisions to the agenda? Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support. Aye.
Okay, so we have a level 3 TA grievance hearing. And we're going to hear that now. I believe we hear from the union first. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So what we're going to do procedurally is the administration team will sit together here with folks defending the grievance. We'll have the association who's presenting the grievance go first. The association bears the burden of proof, so they have to show 51% to 49% the provision of the master agreement was violated concerning each of their 3 grievances. So there's 3 grievances that are going to be heard in a consolidated fashion here tonight. I think that's been agreed upon by the parties, and it's agreed that the board can hear those 3 grievances simultaneously and doesn't have to take them up individually. You guys agree with that? And so, we'll have the association present first, present witnesses. Board members will be allowed to ask questions. And then once the association is finished with its presentation, the administration team will be allowed to ask questions as well. And then the administration team will be allowed to present. The board may ask questions of the administration team, the association may ask questions of the administration team, and then if the association would like to put on some rebuttal information, they'll be provided an opportunity to do that at the end, since they carry the burden of proving that there's been a violation of the contract. Okay. Everyone clear on the process? Are there any questions about the process? Okay. All set, board members? All right. Mr. Beasley.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good. Okay. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Troy Beasley, and I work for the MEA. And what that means is I work for all of the Tecumseh teachers that are MEA members. And as Ray said, we're here tonight for 3 different grievances that are lumped together because they're similar, but they all offer some unique characteristics. But as I go through my presentation on where we feel the remedy is going to lie, I think what you're going to find is a very fair way to go back and try and recreate or make an equitable situation out of something that really truly isn't. I could not agree more that this is a very, very awkward situation. Never really pictured myself putting a grievance forward in a school district where members were caught up inside it. But I really do believe there's something key when we look at the grievance process. This grievance, it is not against members. It's against the district. It's against the folks that are supposed to guard who gets paid what when they either enter the school district or they're a valued employee of the school district. Our issue is with where they are placed with their current salary. That does not follow the master agreement. Article 23, and in particular C and D, that's where the violation occurs. I'm sorry, Article 24, C and D. Thank you. Sorry, just throwing you a little ringer. Article 24, C and D.
Is it C and D, Mr. Beasley? Because in your grievance filing materials, I think you limited it to C and I, if I remember correctly.
It is, D comes into play because it talks about the maximum amount, which
Okay.
does not include the Schedule B and the extras. That's the only reason why D is really in there. And the crux of the kind of the argument is, and I'm not going to read the entire C, but when you get down to the middle, it talks about former teachers returning to teach in the district shall receive full credit for years of service in Tecumseh and for outside experience up to the maximum set forth in Article 24D. That talks about, if not, the extracurricular stuff. That's the contract language. Now let's get into the side of it of what do we do with the situation that these folks over here got caught up in. They did not create. It is my understanding that they had absolutely no kind of input on what they were going to be paid. We're not claiming they were in backdoor conversations with Kelly about I'm going to go from an administrative position to a teaching position and let me make this. We're not claiming that. They were told, here's what your salary is going to be. They truly are the victims here. Let's be clear. They are the victims. The remedy is not turning a blind eye. Because if a blind eye is turned, then it means anyone joining Tecumseh teachers can be paid a variety of different amounts. That is not what the contract says. Yes, there's no salary schedule. It speaks of a base wage. With new folks coming in brand new, it's probably a little easier. It is what it is. Boom, here's what you're gonna make. With people that were here during the process of when it went from a salary schedule to a performance-based system, there was a system in place. Had that system been followed for these folks to go back into the teaching ranks, we would not be here. In a moment, I'm going to pass out a variety of different documents. And I want to walk through 3 spreadsheets. And here's my disclaimer on my spreadsheets. It's as good as the information that I was given. And let me give a shout out to Joanne, that was awesome with sharing information from the district and questions that I had. And what I did is I took what I believe to be the current contract, the information that I got from the district, and previous salary schedules to kind of go back and to recreate where someone would be. Because I think that's the essence of what we're doing. These are not new employees. They have been in Tecumseh schools for up to 20 years. So we're going to take a little bit of time. I'm going to walk you through 3 spreadsheets. My disclaimer is, if there is something that I was told there was a wage freeze and there wasn't, it's an easy fix. I was told that somebody was had a master's and they really had a bachelor's, it's an easy fix. Where I want us to look at the numbers, I want us to spend more time looking at the process of what gets the folks to where they need to be as far as a salary goes. any of those clerical errors, those can be rectified and fixed because it's public record. And we can go back and do that. So I'm going to pass out a few documents and then I'm going to walk you through. Great.
Can I get a copy too, Troy?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Troy, could you make sure, could you give the association team a copy of this information?
I have that, but
Yeah, make sure they get a copy. I'm gonna make sure. We're gonna organize these handouts. And,
Yeah, as
we're
I
gonna
walk
make sure
through.
everyone has copies and everyone has an opportunity to review them before we continue.
okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, Troy, are there gonna be any other records that you're gonna present?
Nope, that'd be it.
Okay, let's go through this because I want to make sure everyone's on the same page here.
Sounds good, Mike.
The first document that was handed to me looks like a grievance chain for the grievance impacted Mr. Schmidt. It looks like it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sticky fingers, 6, 7-page document. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, just, so for everyone's convenience, I'm gonna mark that association 1. So when we're talking about this document, everyone knows that this is association number 1. The next document I have is I'm assuming administration, you've had this, you've had a chance to review it. Is it a full copy of the grievance chain?
There's one additional page.
One additional page.
With different information then, so.
Okay, have you had time to review that page?
Just-
Do you want to take a minute to review that
Yes,
page?
thank you.
Okay. And tell me when you're ready. And we're just doing this so that everyone's on the same page in this waiting process. Okay, ready? All right. Second document I have I marked as association number 2, is the grievance chain for Ms. Francis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-page document. Again, the grievance chain also looks like there's another chart at the end. Okay. I'm assuming there's no objection, and when you're ready to continue after you've reviewed it, we can do that. You good? Okay. Third document I have is the grievance chain for Ms. Mensing. I've marked that Association 3. I want to put a 3 on it. 1, 2, or put an A3 on it for Association. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages with a grievance number 3 spreadsheet at the end. Is that right, Troy? Any objection? We good? All right, good. All right. Association number 4 looks like page 37 of the master agreement. What I marked as A4. Is that what this is?
Yes, but it was from the 12-13 master agreement.
Right, so it's the 2012-2013 salary schedule
Yes.
from the master agreement. Okay. Went on to page that, so that's A4. I'm assuming there's no objection to that. A5 I have, it looks like the census of bargaining unit members with some compensation information and some seniority information. Okay. I've marked that A5. Any question? Have you seen this information? Okay. All right. A5. Then A6, I have as an email to Ms. Keebler from Ms. Gentry. Okay. Is that right? Dated September 25th, 2018. Okay. Have you had an opportunity to see this beforehand? Any objection to its inclusion? Okay. Hearing no objection to the inclusion, we'll move all this information into the record for your consideration. Okay? All right, go ahead, Mr. Goode.
Thank you, Ray. All right, I want to call your attention to Exhibit 1, please, and the very back page. I'm going to take a little bit longer with this exhibit than Exhibit 2 and 3 because the same idea and the same thinking went behind putting it together, just plugging in the correct information. So with all the data that we received from the district, when you look at Exhibit 1, how you read this spreadsheet is you'll see the school years in the far left-hand column, and then this particular person was hired 8/23 of 2002. When they hired in, they began their career in Tecumseh on step 1. They had a bachelor's degree. Back in the 2-3 school year, there was a salary schedule that existed. And that salary schedule, someone who began their career in Tecumseh, if they started on step 1, received a salary of $32,195. You will then see that in the third column that the steps are listed. So in the fourth column, it talks about the degree was earned. So this person was teaching and taught in 2-3, received a step, 3-4 received a step, all the way down to the 8-9 school year. And in the 8-9 school year, they received their master's degree. Now, why that's important is because with a salary schedule, it's not only your years of dedicated, effective service that get you from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, there's also traditionally lanes in the salary schedule. And because of your education, whether it's a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, in this case, a specialist degree, you receive additional money. So in the 8-9 school year, this member received their master's degree. So they began same step, but in a new lane. In 2009, 2010, they moved to step 8 in the master's lane. Then in step 10 and step 11, they moved to step 9. Then in that year, there was a step freeze. And so that's where you see next to the 9, that little F in parentheses. That means that there was a freeze that year. So for 10, 11, 11, 12, and 12, 13, someone who was teaching in the district at that time, they were frozen on a step. They did not get an increase the year after and the year after. Then in 2013, 2014, this individual left the district. We are not claiming that they should not be compensated for that year. Because when we go back to what the contract says, in our current master agreement, they receive years of servicing in Tecumseh and other service. So they were an administrator in another district. In our formula, we are compensating them for that. We want to ensure that when someone started till now, they're getting a year of service credit or performance-based compensation later on that anyone else in the district would have received. Now, when they, in 2012, 2013, where they were at on the salary schedule, and that is why Exhibit 4 is so important, because Exhibit 4 is the last salary schedule that existed. So when you look in Exhibit 4, and you look in the master's degree lane, and someone who is on step 9, their salary was $55,663. So on this spreadsheet, you will see that's the salary amount. 13, 14 left the district, same salary amount. We're assuming they were here, but they were here in the calculation, but they weren't inside the district. They weren't physically here, but we're giving them that year of credit of being here. And how we're doing that, and when Jen and I and John talked a little bit about this, we, in all fairness, that may or may not be correct, that 0.25%. When I went through and read that contract, I read it as from 12-13 to the new master agreement in 14 through 17, that during that year, for teachers that were here, 0.25% was added. And so this is built on that. If that's wrong, and a step was granted or a half step was granted, all of this can be adjusted because everything in this grid is about trying to recreate the last 17 years, I believe. So when you add that 0.25%, that moved the salary to $55,803. So even though they weren't here, if they were here, that's what they would have been, they would have received. Came back to the district in 14-15. And you'll notice in that column there's an A because they're an administrator. If they were in the teaching ranks, that's when we're in a performance-based system. And per the master agreement back in 2014, 2015, someone in this particular circumstance with an effective or highly effective rating, and I asked the question of Joanna, were any of these folks not effective or highly effective? Because if they weren't, they shouldn't get the same performance pay. They were. So you'll see that $2,000 was added. They stayed an administrator, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18. And you'll notice their salary went up because if they were a teacher in the district during that time, their salary would have went up that performance-based system. They would have been rewarded for being an effective or highly effective teacher. This whole grid is based on if they're in the teaching ranks now, they should be compensated as if a teacher were, even the years they were an administrator. Just because you spent a few years as an administrator, and I applaud, never want to be an administrator. No, thank you. I applaud those folks. I do. Doesn't mean that when you move into another position, you should retain that salary. If that's the case, I want to be an administrator here for a year, and then I would love to drive a bus. That's how ludicrous it kind of sounds. There has to be a reason how these salaries come together. In 1819, in the teachers unit, year 17, with all the steps that were earned in when there was a salary schedule, with the performance-based pay systems that were in place for teachers, the correct salary, and again, if all of this is correct, the correct salary is that amount listed right there in 1819 for this individual. And again, I want to touch on 2 and 3, but I don't want to go through the whole thing unless there's questions. There are a couple things I want to highlight. Exhibit 2.
Why don't you,
Or you
try,
want me to-
what I'm suggesting is, why don't you finish your presentation so you can do it uninterrupted, though I'm interrupting you right now.
Okay.
And then at that point, we'll
Ask
take
questions.
your questions.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay?
That's, yep, wonderful. So if we look at Exhibit 2, year of hire, 8/27/99. No experience credit was granted. They had some experience, but they weren't granted anything, according to the district. They hired in step 1 with a BA, making $26,679. Master's degree was earned in 2002, 2003, so they changed lanes. 2008, 2009, became an administrator. 9/10 became an administrator, also earned their ed specialist degree, which prior from 2012-13, that was recognized on the salary schedule. Currently in the contract, there's no provision for someone receiving that specialist degree. There's a master's degree provision for $4,000 if it's after a certain date, but before that date, it was all built into the salary schedule. So this person got their ed specialist degree while we were still in the salary schedule world. So they, if they would have been teaching, would have moved over to that lane. 10/11 as an administrator, but teacher salaries were frozen, so no steps were granted. 11/12, back in the teaching ranks. When you go and look at, okay, where should they be on the salary schedule? Giving every year of credit as a teacher and an administrator, but also recognizing that just because you were an administrator for the years that the teachers were frozen, it doesn't mean that you don't get that frozen year. And again, I never thought I'd be arguing this to a school board. This is crazy talk. But it's fair. If we're trying to figure out how to get a salary that honors the contract, it's fair. Just because you happen to be in an administrative position on years where the teachers took freezes doesn't mean you should receive the benefit of not being frozen when you come back. So 11/12 on step 12, frozen. 12/13 on step 12, frozen. The significance of that is that 12/13 year goes back to Exhibit 4. That's the last year of the salary schedule. So when you look at step 12 of an ed specialist, you will see the $67,660. 13/14, administrator. Still, following the same formula of the 1/4%, the salary would have been $67,830. 14/15 administrator, 15/16 administrator, 16/17 administrator. Using the same formula that every teacher in Tecumseh abided by and agreed to and lived with in effective and highly effective. you received a certain dollar amount depending on your years of service, which is referenced here in the amount increases. That takes us all the way over to year 18-19, which is the 20th year for this person in the district. So giving credit for all 20 years, and what we believe the correct salary is listed right there. Exhibit 3. I guess I lied, I am going to go through these. I apologize. I want to make sure it's just clear though in what the thinking is.
By the way, recorded with that, you said you lied.
I know, thank you. Thank you. If I was more techie, I'd know what, I'd have a comeback for that, a meme or a line or whatever that stuff is. Okay, so, hired in 2007, 2008. Bachelor's degree, step 1. And again, according to what we were told, some of these folks had experience, but they were not granted salary schedule credit when they hired. You can't go back and give it later. You can't go back and say, when we hired you in, we didn't give you credit, but we really, really, really want to retain you now, so we're going to give you those 5 or 6 years we didn't give you. You can't do that. So, step 1 BA, $34,002. In 8-9, received a master's degree, moved over the lane. Step granted in 9-10. 10-11, step granted, but there was a freeze. It was those freeze years. So step 4 in 10-11, 11-12 freeze, 12-13 freeze. Again, 12-13 significant though to Exhibit 4, because that's where you get the $43,611 for anyone who was in Tecumseh at this particular time in these circumstances. 13-14, again the formula of 1/4%. Even as an administrator, that amount was there because anyone who was teaching received that. Stayed an administrator all the way through the 17-18 year. And again, if you look at the amount increases, following the formulas that was in those contracts for those years, the same performance pay that any effective or highly effective teacher received. Not more, not less. Love it or hate it when you have language about amounts of money or salary schedules. It's there for a reason. I taught elementary school for 21 years. Many times I had I won't say argument, I had the conversations with some of my colleagues who taught high school. And they looked upon elementary teachers that we didn't deserve the same amount of money that they did. But then the next day, I would hear an elementary teacher talking to a high school science teacher with the same argument. Or a gym teacher to an art teacher to a special ed teacher. No. I'm sorry. Everyone's important. Everyone has a job and a role. The salary schedule honors that, and the performance pay language honors that, because there's a set amount for effective and highly effective. If we go to 18-19, year 12, as a teacher, that is the amount that should be paid. Now, 1 is a close, fairly close amount, and it's still less. 2 are significantly less. I don't know the people caught up in the grievance personally. I can't imagine. I can't imagine somebody coming to me and say, Troy, we made a choice to pay you wrong, and now we need to give you the right amount. I can't imagine what that feels like. Am I sorry we're sitting here? Yeah, I am. But we have to be. Because remember, it's the most personal, non-personal thing we're probably all going to do this year. the most personal, non-personal thing. It's about the contract. It's about trying to figure out how to make right what was done wrong to these folks. The last two exhibits, I want to skip to exhibit 6 first, because the issue of timeliness of the grievance came up. Some members of the TEA went to leadership and said, you know what? Something doesn't seem right with some amounts of money that some folks are making. Okay, so they asked, how much is everyone making? How many years have they been there? So when you look at exhibit 5, you'll see that. But what you'll notice is there are 3 teachers who do not have their years of service. But when you look at the amounts,
I promised I wasn't going to interrupt, but did you mean
I'm sorry,
exhibit 6 or you still
exhibit
on
5. I'm sorry, exhibit 5.
Oh,
is
no,
the-
you said exhibit 5. I
Yeah,
just wanted to make sure.
okay, yeah, when you look at exhibit 5, you've got the teachers, their 18-19 salaries, and their years of service. And what you'll notice is 3 of the folks on the list have everything except the years of service. And when you look at those amounts that they are paid, they definitely stand out. So that's when it was being looked into of where did those amounts come from, and the timeline begins to tick. Now, one of the arguments was, well, one of these folks were teaching last year. Why didn't you see it last year? I would love to say that what we do at the MEA office is scour over all of the documents we receive, and we look at the amount of money someone's making, and we get the contracts out, and we don't. We can't. We are not the police when it comes to the data that we're given. My membership field assistant receives salary amounts, and they enter into our database system the salary amounts, and dues are calculated, and it goes from there. They don't know. They have no idea. They shouldn't know. As we talk about grievances, and we talk about when the association becomes aware of something, that's when the timeline begins ticking. And when they became aware of it is in Exhibit 6 in that email. Anything, John or Jen, that you guys want to add? I think that takes care of our...
Mr. President, is there any other documents that you'd like to present before we move on to questioning? Thank you. And thank you for your professional nature in presenting the brief. Any questions from any board members?
I'd like to know what the thinking was in negotiating a contract without the table in it, without it, and this, we wouldn't even have this.
I couldn't agree more. I think salary schedules are important because when you have them, you have something clear and concise. I don't buy into the salary schedules reward bad teachers. Salary schedules reward years of service. If someone is a bad teacher and ineffective, they should be ushered out to a new profession. They should be helped, if possible. They should be moved to a plan, but they should not be. I have 3 children. I don't want my kids in a classroom of an ineffective teacher or a minimally effective teacher that's not going to move on. So I couldn't agree more. I'm not quite sure because I was not here when all of that came to be, but I believe that the performance-based system it makes it a lot cloudier and it produces a lot of issues when we're trying to figure out what someone's going to make and how. But I don't have an answer to that, other than it was bargained out. I was not at the table, but I would love to see it bargained back in. with an understanding of, if someone's not effective and highly effective, we will represent the contract and we will make sure their rights are followed, but maybe they shouldn't be teaching anymore. That may not sound very union-like, but I truly believe that.
Okay, any other questions from board members?
Yeah, yep, I have. So, what do you feel, when a teacher gets promoted to administrative position, do you consider them a former teacher in the district?
Yes, when they were a former teacher in the district, yes.
But if we hired an administrator and moved him to a teacher, what would you consider that?
Then I would consider them a brand new teacher.
You mentioned something about time frame. Can you explain to us what the issue is or what the procedure is with the time frame?
One of the reasons of denial was that we were not timely in our grievance, because what the contract speaks to is that we have, let's see here, in the event of a grievance, the alleged aggrieved party shall file with the building principal or immediate supervisor the grievance form within 10 school days of the occurrence or knowledge of the occurrence. So one of the reasons of the denial at the superintendent level was, you've missed the timeline because it's well past the 10-day limit. Well, oh yeah, and another piece that was mentioned, because they got paid on August 28, 2018. So I'm guessing because they received their paycheck electronically, that somehow the insinuation is we should have known that, and we have no way of knowing that. But when we found out about it, that's when the clock starts ticking, and that's key.
So this document, what we've called number 6, is your timeline of when you found out about this, correct?
Yes, it was an email from Jen Gentry requesting Exhibit 5, this document right here.
Any other board member questions?
Yep. In the association number 5, you have the salary schedule for the teachers. That includes their current salary for all teachers. And the question, does that salary include extended professional services, or is that before extended professional services?
My understanding before, that in Exhibit 5, this is the salary that they're receiving for 18-19 without any extended professional services.
According to these sheets, you gave us only one of them holds that specialist degree, is that correct?
That was, yes, that was the information that I received from the district.
And if you said it, I apologize, was there a set dollar amount that's tied to that degree, like it is with the master's degree in the current contract?
The only time there was a set dollar was back in Exhibit 4 when there was a salary schedule.
Correct.
Any other board questions?
That would be in that salary schedule, so the specialist would be what we would see as the 4th column of salaries that would tie to.
Yes, the far right, yes.
Okay, Superintendent, do you have any questions?
I guess the one question I had is, it is your contention that the year that we moved from the salary schedule to the individual wage base, that there was just a 0.25% added, correct?
Yes. And if I'm wrong in that, this is going to sound crazy. I hope I am wrong. I hope there was a step given, or I hope there was more money given, because that means that the amounts that I gave were a little bit low, and the right amount should be a little bit higher, and we get them to what they were promised they were going to make in there.
Any other questions? I've got a few questions. Troy, would you agree that there's no past practice implicated with this grievance?
No, because back in,
So what's the past practice that you would believe is implicated?
in August of 2012, so for the 11-12 school year, Exhibit number 2, this person went back into the teaching ranks, and according to the data that we have, and I researched MEA's database, they received the salary of $67,660, which was the amount that, had they remained a teacher all of this time, during that time they would have received. So at that time when they went back, they were not given super seniority or super amounts of money because of their administrative experience. They were actually placed on the salary schedule as if they never left the classroom.
So there's another person you're saying, other than the 3 grievance that was placed back?
No,
Yeah.
it was grievance number 2.
Okay, so
That person.
grievance number 2, you're saying,
Yes.
was placed back, and the credit that they were given supports your claim, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that there's no past practice, that you're relying solely on the language in the contract, and that you're not otherwise relying on a past practice of behavior between the parties, was agreed upon between the parties? You understand what I'm saying?
I do, but I believe that is the past practice. That,
Oh, okay, other
yes.
than that?
Other than that,
You're-
yeah, other than that. They
Other
went,
than what you've identified that as a past practice?
correct,
Okay.
yes.
I'm just
Oh,
trying to.
I'm sorry,
I'm
there's-
trying to clean up
Yeah.
what evidence might be.
Ms. Gentry has,
Well, I don't know, did you just specifically ask if an administrator had been placed, or it's like someone who had left the district and then come back?
No,
Because
a past practice is really an amendment to a contract that's oral between the parties. It explains the language between the parties.
because we did
And
have,
so I don't see any written amendments to the contract, but I'm asking, are there any oral agreements amending this language that you guys are asserting?
well, I mean.
I'll put it that way as opposed to using the word past practice.
And I guess the only thing that I could say is I know that we have had at least one teacher, if not more, that had left the district for several years, had years of experience, came back, and actually was started back at, given only up to the 6 years, which is in a different, I believe it's in the same article, but a different letter, and so was started at like 48,000.
Okay, and you have information on that person?
I do, I mean, the salary is on the thing, so I can
All
tell you.
right, we might ask about that in a
Okay.
moment. The term full credit in Article 24C, would you agree that's not defined anywhere in the contract, or is it defined somewhere and I'm missing it? So the next to last line, you'll see.
former teachers returning to teach in the district shall receive full credit for years of service. I do not believe that's actually defined anywhere else.
Right, so the parties didn't negotiate a more definite term of what that means, correct?
Not to our knowledge.
Right. When you became aware of this issue, did you demand to bargain it?
No, we did not.
Okay, you haven't filed a ULP, no demand to bargain,
No, we did not.
and instead you chose to file a grievance, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you talk with the administration at all about the placement?
At the grievance level,
Prior to the grievance being filed, did you talk to the administration about where these people should be placed?
no,
So these people were placed without your knowledge?
without our knowledge, yes.
Okay. So in the first time you became aware of the placement was in that September email?
Yes,
I'm
September
understanding.
26th,
All right.
I believe.
All right. Let's get to, I want to make sure I understand, because I think I understand what you're claiming, Troy, but I want to be crystal clear,
Okay.
because this is impacting livelihood. So are you claiming that grievant 1 should be placed from their current salary back to $63,083?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, let me clarify, what we're not claiming is that they should go back and pay back any money, because we do not believe this was
So
their.
that's going to be my first question.
Yeah, no,
That's
they,
a payment of wages issue, right?
yes, it is.
How do we get around a demotion under the Tenure Act?
It was.
How would that not be a demotion under the Tenure Act?
Because they were paid an incorrect wage from the district.
Right, but they have an employment contract at their current number that was signed by the administration and by them, right? So if they're reduced to the number that you're claiming, next thing you'll be representing them with me before the Tenure Commission.
Funny you mention that, because that may be the case.
That's my concern.
And that, I mean, that's been some of my sleepless nights too, because I sit here on
Is anything
mine.
more than
14 days per diem, they get to appeal to the full tenure commission, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so have you thought about how you work around that issue?
Not
I
exactly.
see that
because
issue with two
Yeah.
agreements, not with one of them. Because one of them.
Correct. One will fall within, but two.
Yeah, well,
yes.
yeah, but, okay, so you haven't thought about a work around that issue?
I thought about it, but I don't have an answer to
Okay,
it.
what about the breach of contract considered then? They have an individual employment contract that has a set wage rate. I'm assuming they won't agree to the lower wage rate. How do we avoid a breach of contract claim, and how do you guys avoid a tortious interference with a contract claim?
I think if we prevail in our grievance, then what's going to happen is we're going to have that follow-up conversation of,
Would it make sense to grandfather them in at their current levels and look at the process moving forward? Or are you not claiming that? Do you believe that their compensation should actually be decreased?
I do not believe there should be grandfathered in from now and on. We would be open to conversations of what are we going to do for this year, and then what's next year look like, because it is this is a very, very, very sticky situation, and it gets stickier the farther we get into.
Right, and tenure is a statutory right?
Yes.
Okay. This language, and I think Tim touched on it, and that is a real good question, because I need to know the answer to that too. Former teachers, and I want to be clear, I'm not a decision maker, I'm helping these guys with the process. But it says, former teachers returning to teach in the district. So it says returning to teach in the district. So it's got that preposition in the district, which is modified by returning. Let me ask this. Is this a case of first impression under this contract language, moving administrators back in? Or do you believe that this sentence is applicable to this situation? If you believe this sentence is applicable to this situation, why does returning not modify the preposition in the district?
I think it's very applicable because they were a former teacher, now they're an administrator, and they are returning to the district to teach. So returning to the district doesn't necessarily mean leaving the district when it's returning to the district to teach.
Okay, do you guys have any negotiation notes or anything that shows how that language was reached and what the parties were thinking at the time, or any modifications?
I do not have that with me. I could look and see. That sounds like it's been a long time.
Looking for information to help us, right? Okay. I think that's all I have. Did my question spur any questioning from any of you? Any additional questions?
That, just the one instance from the past is our one benchmark as far as past practices, is that correct?
The one instance for
Well, it's a
grievance, yeah, for
I'm sorry,
exhibit
I'm
2.
confused by using the term past practice because that confuses people.
Okay.
Past practice is really an oral amendment to a contract that is how the parties have interpreted the contract. I think what their response was, which is a good one, is they believe they have a comparator. They have someone who, in essence, was in the same situation as these folks, went back and didn't receive the same credit. In fact, one of them themselves, when they initially went back, didn't receive the same credit as when they were returned the second time to teaching. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
And the reasoning behind that was the current contract, correct? The reasoning that they were placed at where they were was based on that contract.
I don't think they know.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I wasn't
They
here.
weren't the decision maker. I don't want to answer for you guys.
Yeah, no, I wasn't here during
So
the time.
that's the question we have for here is why we're at where we're at.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't it argued sometimes that if both sides, if something happens, and neither side challenges it, and it happens more than once and continues on, that could be challenged as a past practice?
Yeah, it could. That can show that there really isn't a
an acknowledgement agreement between the parties that this is how the contract's interpreted, this particular language. This is I'm dealing with an ex-labor guy right here. He knows stuff. All right. Ready? Okay. Thank you very much. Very helpful.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start and talk a little bit about the process that I went through in making this determination. And I also want to give you a little bit of history on how we got to where we are. I think one of you asked, the salary schedule and the individual wage base. So as you know, I was a teacher here in the district, and I worked under this salary schedule, so I remember it from that side. And then I was here working with a few boards ago to move away from a salary schedule and into the individual wage base. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions you have. It was part of that entire process. So just a little bit of background about what actually happened during that year. So in the 2014-15 school year, the TEA moved from that traditional salary schedule to, that had steps and lanes, as you heard about, to an individual wage-based structure. The year prior to that, the negotiations, the TEA agreed to meet on a regular basis to talk about moving in this direction. So we had a full year of planning and preparation before it was actually went into place in the bargaining agreement. So what we identified in 2014 when we were moving over to the individual wage base is that there were many discrepancies based on the past placement of teachers on the salary schedule. And some of you may remember things like half a lane, half a step, maybe some off-schedule payments. So the salary schedule had actually been manipulated in a way that it was very difficult to try to understand. So what we did, the administration and the TEA came together and said, these are the things that we need to start to consider as we set people's individual wage base. So these are some of the things that we looked at. And I did this, actually, we have our former TEA president sitting back there with Lori Spot, so she might be helping with this too. So we had employees that were hired under at 10% under base, and that was around the year 2010. That was prior to me being here in the district. We had employees that were frozen on steps between 2010 and 2013. We had employees who had earned master's degrees but were still stuck in there. We had employees who at step 3 and above received, as Mr. Beasley stated, the 1/4% step adjustments. That is correct. In addition, employees that had a performance evaluation of effective or highly effective received an additional half a lane movement at that time. Employees who had the same amount of years in the district were paid at different rates. In conjunction, the board and administration and TEA made the determination to walk through every single person's wage base to ensure that we made up for those discrepancies. And then if there were other discrepancies or adjustments that were determined either by the administration or the TEA leadership, we came together and made those adjustments. These adjustments were done on the individual wage basis between the administration and the TEA leadership. The amount of the adjustment at this time varied between $59.09 to $6,830, based on some or all of those factors. In addition to the adjustment, each employee received an increase of either $2,000 if they had worked in the district for 12 years or less, or $1,300 if they had worked in the district 13 years or more. Article 24C, which was identified as a violation, states that former teachers returning to teach in the district shall receive full credit for years of service in Tecumseh and for outside experience up to the maximums set forth in Article 24D. This language allows the latitude for determining service credit specifically for TPS teachers returning to teach in the district. When reviewing the TEA master agreement in its entirety, the contract is silent on placements in this specific instance. When the contract is silent, the superintendent relies on Article 3 board rights in the absence of any specific contradictory language, specifically in reference to Article 24. When reviewing the individual wage basis for TEA members for 2017-18 for Grievance 2, I looked at members with the same amount or similar number of years, as well as educational background and degrees earned were all considered. Consideration was also given to the fact that Grievance number 2 was not part of the 2014-15 wage adjustment process. In addition, an acknowledgement of service as an administrator was also considered. Finally, the administrator, because the administrator contract is for a longer length, in the case of Grievance 2, it's 206 days per year, as compared to a teacher contract of 185 days per year. The individual wage base was adjusted to reflect that to the $77,300. In conversations with Jennifer Gentry and John Laney prior to Grievance number 2 returning to the TEA bargaining unit, I shared that Grievance 2 would have an individual wage base comparable to her years of experience and educational background and the degrees she had. At that time, she had 18 years in the district and a year of prior service for a total of 19 years. And the Grievance 2 was assigned an individual wage base. There was no question from either Jennifer or John regarding Grievance number 2's wage base throughout that entire school year. They did not request to know her wage base at any time. In regards to Grievance 1 and Grievance 3, a similar process was followed as shared with Grievance 2. Hearing nothing from the TEA leadership team regarding the process followed with Grievance 2, I completed the same analysis. Again, it was recognized that neither Grievance had the adjustments that occurred in 2014 when moving from a salary schedule to an individual wage base. Looking at TEA members with similar years of service and education, the range fell between $65,728 and $71,018. Taking into account that both Grievance were not part of the 2014 wage-based adjustments and additional consideration for administrative service, including the extended contractual days, they were placed at the individual wage base of $75,000. A conversation took place with Jennifer Gentry and John Laney in March of 2018 regarding the individual wage-based placement for both Grievance. TEA leadership asked if I was going to do the same thing that I did with Grievance number 2, and I answered yes, but since they had less years of service, they would be placed lower than Grievance number 2. I said that I would place both Grievance comparable to TEA members' wage base with similar experiences in education. There was no other conversation regarding any of the 3 Grievance until the grievances were filed on October 3rd, 2018. The members impacted by the grievances were not notified, as you heard earlier, by TEA leadership until after the grievances were filed with the building principals. It should also be noted that during the entire duration of the determination of the individual wage bases of all 3 grievances, I was meeting monthly with both Jennifer and John. This item was never brought up for discussion, including before I learned of agreements from my own building administrators. The grievances were not brought forth by the individual TEA members, but in fact were brought forth by TEA leadership without the grievance knowledge, and to my understanding, I was told that it was by the direction of the MEA. It is perplexing to me that these grievances were filed on October 3rd, 2018, and the MEA just reached out to gather information related to the grievances from our district on January 8th, 2019 at 5:59 p.m. In addition, it has been difficult to ascertain the position of the TEA as they have failed to share their position as to why the disposition of the superintendent was not acceptable. There were many efforts of resolution for this grievance at level 2, including a conversation with both Jennifer and John on October 30th, 2018, where they shared a pay range that they felt would be acceptable. The following day, I contacted Jennifer, and shared that I would be willing to have a conversation about that. They gave me a number and a range, and I shared that we could definitely look at that. When she contacted me the following day, she shared the name of a specific bargaining member, stated that that was the number that they would accept. I thanked her for getting back to me. She then shared that she needed to be able to look this person in the eye. Please remember this board hearing was originally scheduled for Monday, December 10th, 2018. However, we found out on Friday, December 7th, in the evening from Jennifer that the TEA leadership would not be able to attend due to the unavailability of the UNISERV director. I reached out to Mr. Beasley on December 14th to discuss the possibility of a resolution. Troy shared that he was interested in resolving this grievance at level 2. He said he needed to meet with Jennifer and John early in the week of December 17th and wanted to see if I could
I'm
meet.
going to cut you off right there. The settlement discussions are
Okay.
privileged between the parties.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And to me, that doesn't get to the heart of the issue as to whether the contract was violated.
Sure.
And to make those sort of arguments in an arbitration will prevent you guys from trying to resolve things informally in the future.
Okay.
So let's get back to the issue.
Okay. So I would like to answer, if I could, a few of the points that Mr. Beasley brought up.
Sure.
Is that appropriate? Okay.
Yep.
So one of the things he said is about the previous salary schedules, and I think I shared with them, those had been severely manipulated over the years. There were some tough times, there were freezes, again, teachers were hired 10% off base. So when we went through the negotiations for this 2014 individual wage base, that's why we had to make so many adjustments, because there had been so many discrepancies within the teaching ranks. I did talk about the half lane, and I think that's what you were saying, that the 1/4% of something nothing. So we already talked about that. I do want to share with the board some information on an employee, because we're kind of talking about how this all works. There was an employee who worked in the district. He entered the district in 2010-11, and that he was hired in at $30,753. He stayed here for the 11-12 school year, and that was during the freeze time. During 2012-13 and 13-14, he left the district. He returned back to the district in 2014-15, so that's when the individual wage base was introduced. And he came in, and his starting salary at that time was $39,672. So you can see that somebody did leave, come back, and benefited from that adjustment that was made in the 2014-15 individual wage base. I think the other point I just wanted to clarify, I think he was talking about grievance 2, when she left, was teacher, principal, and then came back to be a teacher. So when she left to become an administrator in the district, she was on step 9, and that was in 2007-8. So during that time, there was also the freeze that started 2010-11, 11-12, 12-13. When she came back into the district at 12-13, she was placed on step 13. So that would indicate that although other teachers on the salary schedule were in that frozen part, the administration did allow for the administrator to come back into the TEA bargaining agreement and gave them credit for those steps as they existed. I guess one last note, the timeliness that Mr. Beasley talked about. when you look at the information on grievances in the contract, and it says in there, so for a level 1 grievance, the timeliness is that there's 10 school days of the occurrence or the knowledge of the occurrence. As I mentioned earlier, I was in constant communication with Jennifer and John throughout the entire time. So I would contend that there should have been some knowledge to check into that. To check on the wage base. In the past, what's happened is, well, I'll say since I've been here, we've gotten a request from the TEA rep to have all of the wage base, and we give them a hard copy of that. That had been past practice from And I think, I just want to, one more, just kind of point you to, I think it can be any one of the grievances article or exhibits. The TEA, and I'm not sure if this really clarifies the comment about do we see them as the administrators as teachers. I think somebody asked that. So if you look in there with the TEA's position, I'm looking on page 2. The TEA notes that while teachers can begin with full credits of service, it questions whether the phrase teacher presently on staff applies to administrators and suggests that that's up to interpretation. And then they talk about grievance 1 with 1 year serving as an administrator. Does this teacher presently on staff include administrator time? The TE says yes, it does include those years. And that was a statement as part of the grievance process.
Board members, questions?
So did I understand correctly that when you said when they went to the steps, from the steps to the individual, yes, that in 2014 or whatever that was, were all the salaries reviewed of all the teachers?
Correct. And we did that in conjunction with the TEA. And we went back and forth quite a bit to make sure that we didn't miss anyone.
What was the adjustment amount that year?
I don't have that in front of me.
You mean total?
For each individual teacher?
Oh, I just have the range, the $59 to the 6,000.
Okay.
The 6,000 was the 6,800 was the highest.
Mr. Beasley, did you, and I'm going on a turn here, but just to get to the crux of it, did your calculation include that adjustment?
It did not.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
I guess I asked Mr. Beasley the same question. When a teacher gets promoted to an administrative position, do you consider them a former teacher in the district?
Yes. Yeah.
And when a teacher leaves the district, they all left the district and came back, do you consider him a former teacher then, or do you place him at a new teacher's salary?
In looking at the language there, he would be considered also a former teacher returning. And that's why I shared the example of the other teacher that left, came back, or was here, left, and came back. And we did give him credit for being a former teacher.
And so, as an administrator, we should give credit. Your belief is that we should give credit for years of service as an administrator.
Yes, and that was what I read there. That was an agreement between the TEA and us.
So you mentioned under the board's rights. Now, did the board have any input to any of this, or was this all administrative decisions?
No, the board was aware. Yeah.
I think she was referencing the management rights clause, though.
Right.
So discussion of district and management rights clause.
I just want to be clear, you guys had multiple conversations over the past couple of years as normal conversations that you would have as you meeting with the reps. But you never discussed an actual number for any of these salaries for any of this period of time. There was no actual salary given to the union representatives.
When no.
You never gave them.
I mean, not for this case.
Not for this
For
case.
other ones, if they asked, they would say, this is what we think. Or if there was one that I had a question about, and I think Jennifer referred to one actually, where would that be if they were coming from out of district? What would be that amount?
I think you said that, I think it was agreement 2 was completed a year earlier. And you said that you spoke with the association about grievance number 2. Did you talk to the association about the number that was going to be paid to grievance 2 so that they were on notice of that salary?
At that time, I was still working through the process to make that determination. So I did not go back afterwards and share that, correct?
Hey, would you agree with the association that the first time they learned about the numbers was probably when they started running their salary calculations?
I can't, I don't know that.
Well, let me ask it this way. Would you agree that you didn't provide them the salary numbers for these people?
I did not check to make sure they had the wage base, that's correct. The big spreadsheet, yes.
Any other questions? Yes.
I went back and looked at the salary schedule for everybody and just quickly wrote down same years of service. So if we look at grievance 1, there's 4 other people in the salary schedule that have 17 years of service. The highest paid one I can see in here is $71,018, which would be roughly $4,000 more. Can you explain to me the reason that there's an additional $4,000?
Yeah, so part of it is not being adjusted for that wage base. And a lot of these ones, you look at it, it really depended in the old salary schedule when they received their masters and how that accumulated. And then also credit for years of the administrative work.
So they're getting additional dollars because they were admin versus teachers?
Because their contracts were longer if you're comparing days to days. Yeah.
Okay. And then basically the same thing with the other 2. It's the same question. The highest wage I can see in here is definitely lower than what any of these are. So same answer for all 3 is, okay. And then I guess my last question would be, unless I find another one, between grievance 1 and grievance 3, the years of service is significantly different, but the pay is exactly the same. Can you explain the basis behind that?
Yes, so again, looking at the former teachers returning to work in the district shall receive credit for years of service in Tecumseh and for outside experience. So when we did the 2014 adjustments, there were people that came in and were not given credit for years of service prior to coming in, and then others who were given significant number of years. So we really worked together with the association to make that right.
Okay.
But you didn't work with the association, though, to make sure that grievance 1's compensation was similar to grievance 3's. You're not saying that.
No, I'm saying when comparing to others who were in the bargaining.
But the question still remains.
When I looked at,
I did the same thing. I went through and looked at the math on each one. So why is
one person with 17 years of experience getting paid the same as someone with 12 years of experience?
Yeah, they both have 17 years of experience if you include experience from prior work experience.
Okay.
5 years in a previous district.
One earned their BA in 2002 and one earned their BA in 2007. So they were working before they earned their BA?
No, they would have their BA, that's what they had when they came in.
That's what they, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Thank you.
I wanted to clarify that,
Thank
so
you.
that the original hire date is not when they earned their BA, that's just their original.
That's what they did.
I have a question. When they were moved, and they had X amount, you were making X amount of money as an administrator, and it was based on a longer year, the more days worked. Did you decrease their wage to match that salary but less days worked when they moved to a teacher?
Yeah, their wage was decreased.
Okay.
Correct.
In each one of the grievances, they're all pretty much identical. Next to the last page of the grievance itself, there's a assertion that under 24I, an employee who earns a master's degree after June 30, 2013 shall have $4,000 annual employee minimum-based wage. The TEA position was that they're not sure when they earn their MA, but they would agree to compensate them out before. Your response was that they have not demonstrated violates, and he said that she earned it in 2008 as contractually entitled to this payment.
Yeah.
The to be contractually entitled to it, they have to earn it after June 30, 2014.
Correct. That was not included in there. So that just means that if they earned this, when they earned this in 2008, they were contractually entitled to that payment, so we couldn't take it away.
You're
So
talking about, it was on a
It was
previous.
prior
contract,
to, yes, correct.
Not the current.
Correct, correct.
In that same vein, each one of these indicates, your response, that same exact response, that they all have their specialist degree.
No, that was a mistake.
Okay.
So there's just one. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Can you tell us how you came up with the salaries, these new salaries for them? Did you have?
Yeah, let's take agreement one. How did you come up with the salary for agreement one?
So what I did is walked through, and again, trying to make my best judgment based on what those changes were made in court. That was really the pivotal piece, and that is a very difficult thing to do. So as I went through and I started to compare with people who had the same salary schedule, I just walked them all the way through and looking at making sure that they had those years of service credit there. So
Is there
that's.
anyone that you compared them to?
Yes. Did you say agreement one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that was, I think, the numbers that John shared. The 60
It was 65, 728.
to 71,
018.
018. Yes.
So the three at the 65, 728, the one at 71, 018.
Yeah, and there's some with lower numbers of years that are at the 71, 018 as well.
Depending on the degrees and.
Yeah. When you get.
I mean, to a certain extent, you agree the association has a beef about fairness. Wouldn't you agree that these people are all more highly compensated than any other association members with similar experience in the teaching ranks? You agree with that?
I can see that.
Any other questions from board members? Mr.
One question, out of curiosity. In each of the grievances.
Wasn't quick enough.
In each of the grievances, there's a significant time lapse between the level 2 filing on 10/17 and a meeting with the superintendent on 11/12. Why did that exceed the 5 days allowed by that much?
I would have to look at the timeline, but that was an agreement between the administration and the TEA to, due to our schedules.
So it was a mutual agreement,
Yes,
and that's
yes,
why
yes.
it's set out to law?
Yes. The only thing that was different was the actual hearing scheduled for December 10th. And then, so then I found out from an email from Mr. Simpson about this meeting. So that was the only one that we didn't have conversation about, but all the other ones we did as far as the time.
Your turn, Mr. Beasley. Any questions?
I don't know if they're questions, well, I think they are. Had reference,
Hold it to questions, and then when we're done, I'm going to give you an opportunity to present more information.
okay.
So right now, limit it to questions. I've got a few more questions I want to ask.
Okay. It was, I guess my question is, on grievance number 2, it was referenced that they were on step 13. And when I look at exhibit 4, there is no 13. 12, 13, 14, and 15 are all the same salary schedule amounts. And I want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
I think my point was just that they passed over the freeze.
I'm sorry, they what?
So they were not impacted, their salary was not impacted by the freeze as others who were in the bargaining agreement. Does that make sense?
Not
So
really,
10,
because they were in 12, 13, 14, 15, they would have been frozen in 12, frozen in 13, frozen in 14. So even though there was no money amount attached to it, they were still frozen on those years in a traditional salary schedule. Because just because someone isn't hit that 16 to 20 mark doesn't mean that they get kind of super seniority or bypass the freeze. So
I'm saying that's where the placement was made.
okay, I guess that answers it, because whether this person was at 12 or 13, at least in my calculations, it wouldn't make a difference because it was the same dollar amount. So after that point, we went to a performance-based system, and that's where the merit pay would kick in and the salary schedule was no longer there. So as long as whether they were 12, whether they were 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15, they were the same dollar amount. So I just want to make sure. Thank you. And I guess I had a question. You said during this, was it the 14-15 year when this adjustment was made? The highest adjustment was around $6,800. And anyone that was teaching during that time, they would have received somewhere between $59 and $6,800.
In addition to the 2,000 and 1,300.
Okay.
Sorry, that was the extra adjustments.
Okay. And I heard two different answers to the same question from you. You were asked, days, because administrative days are longer, that's why administrators are paid more. And I thought I heard that, yes, when someone's an administrator and they spend 3-4 years as an administrator and they go back as a teacher, they need to take that additional compensation with them because they had longer days. I thought I heard answer one that way. And then I thought I heard the second answer to the same question of no, they're paid the additional money when they're an administrator. But when they go back, their salary is decreased because they don't work as many days. So I'm curious which one was the answer.
Yeah, so the salary was decreased.
It was decreased.
Correct.
Thank you. So during that adjustment, everyone on the salary schedule received some type of adjustment from $5,900 to $6,800, give or take, somewhere in there.
If you include the percentage, the half of the room, and then some had additional adjustments, that's how it got cast out.
Okay. But the percentage and the additional it was all an additional to that $5,900 to $6,800, correct?
There was some in addition to that. Yes, some got $200, some got $1,000.
Okay. Does that document still exist somewhere? Because I think that would be pretty pertinent. Maybe I'm getting out of my question phase, going into my talking phase yet. So if I am, politely stop me.
It's not unusual for you.
I know. But I guess I'm wondering if that were the case, the discrepancies would only be at a maximum of $6,800. But some of the discrepancies on what I believe they should be being paid to what they're being paid is far greater than that. And so if they're not getting additional pay for being an administrator, and we just say they would all benefit from the $6,800, it still doesn't take them to the amount that you decided they deserved. And since I'm talking, instead of questioning, one more thing to stop. The granting of the 5 years after the fact is an interesting concept, because I'm sure there are lots of, especially elementary folks sitting behind me, and tomorrow we'll be talking about this, is they would love to have some additional credit they weren't granted. And I hope if we granted for some, we granted for all. I hope. And
We did the adjustments that was taken into consideration.
I hope, and I would love to sit down and look at all that, because I would love, because if that happened, I applaud everyone in the district for doing that, because that truly is an awesome